Hi, welcome to the Learning House again. I'm Corey, and today I'm meeting with Sharon Fisher from BJU's Homeworks Division. Sharon, thanks for joining me today. I've been really looking forward to chatting with you.
Me too. It's been great to talk by email. Even better now we can see each other. That's great.
We've always had a very high regard for BJU. We have families all across the country that we're constantly hearing from every day who use BJU resources, who love their textbook resources, who have the distributed or distance learning. We work with a lot of schools that use BJU resources. As an author and a speaker for BJU, you've been instrumental in helping families to do education well for many years, and we're so thankful for that. Before I ask you to unpack stuff about how to do education well, can you tell me a little bit about your family and your journey in Christian education and homeschool?
Sure. Yes. Well, I studied at BJU back in the 1980s, actually.
Neat.
And interestingly, the professor that I had was encouraging everyone to teach Christian education. I went to public school, elementary school, just a couple of years in Christian school, but public school. And so I didn't even think about Christian education. And he was really pushing toward Christian education. And I remember having a debate with him during class about Christian school and public school as a teacher and why I felt called to public school. And he continued to push until the Lord broke my heart for Christian education. And it wasn't long before I realized God was calling me to teach with a Christian education. I can't imagine teaching anything educational without God being the center of it. And so for me, Christian education always was the consideration. So I taught for a couple of years, and then God gave us 4 boys. I stayed home with them. And when they were school age, I went back to teaching. They went to school where I taught. So we were together in the same place, which was Bob Jones Academy. And taught there for a number of years. And then I went over to BJU Press as an author and got to see the other side of that. Got to write some curriculum and get to interact with the video teachers. And I'm just starting my 11th year now with Precept Marketing, which is the marketing and selling arm for BJU Press Homeschool. And so I speak on their behalf. I also am the curriculum specialist. And so my sole focus is to encourage families to teach with a biblical worldview and to provide the resources for them to do that. So not only that, but I'm also able to help homeschool 2 of my grandkids right now. So I'm in the middle of it myself.
That's great.
And it's a little bit different homeschooling, talking about homeschooling.
Love That's so neat. That's so neat. So I didn't realize that you're a BJU grad. You've been a teacher at BJU Academy. I shared with you that my husband went to Bob Jones University, so I have a high regard for the output of the product of Christian education. I really, we've always had a high regard for BJU's academic materials, and that's so neat to hear that you've been in all of these places.
That's been a blessing.
Yeah, that's neat. That's neat. And my husband, just having been a BJU student, had friends that went to the academy and so on. So perhaps we've crossed paths many times.
I bet we might have.
Now you're homeschooling your own grandkids. Tell me a little bit about that part of your journey.
So it's been so fun. So my daughter-in-law wanted to homeschool pretty much from the beginning. And she had the same passion to teach with a biblical worldview. And for a little bit, they decided they had moved around quite a bit. My son's a welder. And so welders notoriously travel a lot for their work. And so they had moved to a different town. And my granddaughter went to a public school for, maybe 6 weeks. And they were like, no.
Yeah.
And so I got her as many materials as I could. And being familiar with BJU Press, I pulled what I had. And she loved the teacher's editions. She loved to be able to teach it. And she had never really seen understanding teaching lessons that were reading and math with an understanding of God in the middle of all of it. And she just loved it. And so she did that for a couple of years. And then she was pregnant with my grandson, and was homeschooling, her, and then taking care of him. And then she got pregnant with twin girls. And at that point, their hands were very, very full. And she
Mhm.
was now third grade. And I said, hey, I taught third grade. That was like kind of my baby. Could I take a crack at homeschooling her? Because I'm so familiar with it. And when I'm not traveling, I'm at home, so I can make it work. So she very graciously, and my son allowed me to
Aw,
do that. And so now she's
what a
in
treat.
sixth grade, and Jack's in kindergarten. And today I just sat there. I record almost every lesson that he does, watching him read, listening to him sound out the words, and seeing the joy of them learning and being able to be part of that. And then chatting with mom and making sure she knows what's going on. We have a great relationship. And so, there are days where I'm traveling, I can't do things. I let mom know, hey, I need you to do this and that. She takes care of it. And the both of us work together and make sure the kids are taken care of. And it's just great.
Wow, what a neat team. That's a real dream for many families,
Yeah.
just to be able to have that. What a treat. What a treat. Um, you've had experience as a student, as a teacher, as an administrator, as an author, and as a homeschooling grandparent. If you had to distill what a strong education is into 2 or 3 key factors, tell me, what would you say to my
Well, I think every family is different. And so I think a lot of that depends on the family. But anyone who is a Christian family who centers their home on God, a biblical worldview, and teaching, centering all the learning on that. And then also not just the learning, but your home environment.
Mhm.
And then understanding your children, understanding their gifts, understanding how they learn, and then accommodating to
Mhm.
that so that they can serve God and love one another, so that you're a family, you're contributing to each other's growth and to each other's strengths and weaknesses. And that's really teaching them to be part of a community is
Mhm.
first at home, right? So
Mhm.
teaching them to love their neighbor means learning how to do that at home. And when you're teaching with a biblical worldview, that just makes it easy. So um, you know, see what their gifts are, see what their weaknesses are, try to meet them where they are, and go for it.
Neat. So you talked about having that biblical worldview and knowing your kids well, that relational part. Can you talk to me about a biblical worldview? How would you define what a biblical worldview is, and why should that be foundational?
It is everything. The academics are good and they're measurable. Biblical
Mm.
worldview is not so measurable until we get older.
Mhm.
But
So true.
BJU Press actually they talk a lot about biblical worldview shaping, and you can open up any teacher's edition and they will spend a lot of time talking about it. But basically the idea is that God's word is a narrative, and it's about creation. God created the earth. He put man and woman on the earth. He gave them dominion over everything. They chose to sin. They disobeyed, and there was a fall. Not only did Adam and Eve fall, but all of mankind fell.
Mhm.
The earth is cursed because of it.
Mhm.
But yet God still gave him a job to do. He gave him a job to have dominion over this cursed earth, right? And so he promised that he would return. He would redeem the thing. So it's a creation, fall, and redemption story. And we're kind of on the end of waiting for the redemption, the redemption
Mhm.
part. Except that Jesus did come and he did die for us, and that he is preparing a home for us. And one day he will have complete dominion over everything. Satan will be defeated and there'll be no more sin. But in the meantime, we're still populating the earth and taking dominion over things. So that includes math and science and reading and literature and geography and all of those things. So those are really natural places to talk about God. And then how do we use these things for his glory? So for example, for kindergarten, so my grandson was learning to count by tens, and the video teacher had a little tray of seeds, and she was counting the seeds in groups of tens, and she was trying to explain that she could very neatly plant these seeds easily, and that would help the plants to grow well. But if she didn't space them out, it would crowd out the seeds and the seeds would die, and that would be a waste of time and money. And the farmer could make much more money and also produce more crops if he would do a good job. So even in counting the seeds, we're talking about making good use of or having dominion over the things that we have at our disposal and using those things wisely, being a good steward of them, and using them to serve our neighbor, to love our neighbor, and to serve God. And so we can talk about that in math, we can talk about that in English, we can talk about history. And so what BJU Press does so well is it weaves that through all the lessons. It's not just putting a Bible verse on something, although a Bible verse is a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing more than just exposing you to scripture. We're trying to teach you that narrative of creation, fall, and redemption, and where we fall into that today as a third grader or a kindergartner or a high schooler. And what do I do with my cell phone? And what decision do I make today when my neighbor says this to me, or when this scientific thing comes by and I have to decide, is it okay to choose that, or is it okay not to choose that? Those are all conversations we're having throughout all of our academics. And I love that because that's application of real life situations. And our goal is, our prayer is that as kids grow and they become adults, that they make God their own, that they're not just knowing who God is, but that they choose God, that they love him and want to serve him, and that they're equipped to be able to defend their faith and to be able to be people who love other people in the community, but still stand for truth. And so to be able to do that through kindergarten through 12th grade in your subject areas, that's just a bonus.
Yeah. I love the way that you said biblical worldview is everything. And it's actually math, English, geography. They are an outflowing of that.
Right.
That if we are to be in relationship with God and to understand him as well as we can, to know him better, is to learn to read and to learn your math and to be able to interact with the world in the way that God wants us to, is to learn our science, to learn to write, to learn to do those things. So yeah, I like the way that most of the time we look at worldview as something that we add to our math or that we add to our spelling. And I like the way that you've kind of switched that around.
Well, one thing that I love about it too, BJU Press has a whole team of people that is the biblical worldview shaping team, and they have designed a scope and sequence from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Mm-hmm. They have objectives for every lesson and what major themes they think are important at certain grade levels and at certain subjects. So, for example, I've got a copy of a third grade cultural geography book in front of me right now, and they're talking about the different cultures. And so some of the biblical worldview they're talking about is about environment and culture, citizenship, economics, government, and religion. And you can find all those in other textbooks, but what you're not going to find is recalling biblical teaching, explaining biblical teaching, evaluating controversial concepts, formulating a Christian understanding of a controversial concept, and applying a Christian understanding to life. That's third grade. And so it's meant to be at that level, but you're discussing all those same things, but at a deeper and richer level to life. And so that's pretty deep for a third grader, but it's still at their level, understanding geography.
Okay. And something that you've talked about there is just the ability to think with a Christian mindset, or with an informed view of what the Bible foundationally gives us. And I think a lot of that speaks to critical thinking. We chatted a little bit about critical thinking. Yeah. Can you tell me how that ties together with this teaching of a biblical worldview? What can you tell me about critical thinking?
Well, and this it really does tie well, and that's another thing that I love about this too. Critical thinking, that's another buzzword too, just like biblical worldview is kind of a popular thing. But critical thinking is not just thinking and recalling information. It's being able to understand what it is, and then to be able to make an informed decision based on a criteria. And so if your worldview is biblical, your critical thinking is based on biblical point of view. And that's why if you watch the news or have a conversation about politics with somebody, even though you both might be thinkers, you might be thinking outside the box, at the end of the day, our standard is not the same. And so someone who is not a Christian can certainly think critically, but the standard is not biblical. And so that becomes an issue as well, too. So we want our kids to be critical thinking, but we want that component of understanding the biblical worldview to go with it, so that they can make those decisions.
So just to recap, that idea that like a biblical worldview is key. Critical thinking is key. They aren't interchangeable, because we can be critical thinkers without having a biblical worldview. We can have a biblical worldview without critical thinking. Both of those things, though, are so much more powerful when we put them together. Right?
They really are. They really are. Right. And so when we're talking about that being the fundamental idea of homeschooling, then how do we teach our kids? What do we do? What are the activities that we choose? And it's not going to be all book learning. And as much as I love a good textbook, and I do, critical thinking is really sought out and done well by evaluating, analyzing, and creating. And you're probably familiar with Bloom's taxonomy as part of the learning, but we start at the very bottom level of recalling things. So you ask a question, maybe you're reading to a kindergartner and you're talking about the boy and his dad go to fly a kite, and you ask them, what did they go do? Well, he went to fly a kite. It's a black and white answer. We know the answer. But we might talk about the dad and the little boy went to fly a kite. He needed to wear his windbreaker. And it was a chilly 35 degrees. Dad wanted him to wear a hat. So then you might ask the question, what was the weather like? Well, we have to decide, he's wearing a windbreaker, he's wearing a hat. I'm having to use clues to help me to determine an answer and evaluate and figure it out. Well, it's cold, isn't it? Right. So what time of year do you think it is? And why did Dad take him out there? And how long have they been out there? And so you're having those questions. So a lot of Q&A is going on through the teacher's edition, or for using a video course, the teacher's asking a lot of questions. So it's not a lot of just bookwork where they read, answer, although that is useful. We're asking a lot of questions. And so we have recall, but then we're doing other things. We're evaluating, we're analyzing. And at the end of the day, we're creating. And so there's an activity that we did, and we do this pretty often, especially in math and in science. And a lot of parents love these STEM activities. They take time. They can get a little messy. But they're worth doing, though, because what they're doing is they're learning by doing. And so we had done an activity with fettuccine noodles and styrofoam and marshmallows, and they were to build a building, and they were going to simulate. My granddaughter was simulating an earthquake. So you had to decide what a 4.0 was and what a 1 point, a heavy earthquake and a light earthquake, on the way you shook it. And then depending on how the building broke, you had to analyze what was wrong with it. What do you need to do to rebuild it to make it better? We weren't just understanding what an earthquake was and what happens to a building during an earthquake, but we're learning how to rebuild during an earthquake and to make improvements. And so that becomes part of the biblical worldview too, because we're teaching kids not just to do things, but to do things better. So we're making a life better for people. We're loving our neighbors. We're caring for things. And God has given us abilities and talents. Wouldn't we as Christians want to be at the forefront of that? Why wouldn't we want them to be the ones that are designing and creating new and better things? I mean, homeschoolers are very well known for that, and we have the environment to do it. So critical thinking is such a big thing in homeschooling, and that's because we have the time and the resources to be able to spend with our kids to do that. So as much as I love the bookwork, if it lends itself to those activities and you're taking the time to do those things, now we're seeing your kids shine. Now we know my son's a filmmaker. If I had homeschooled him, and I would have understood this a lot sooner, we would have done a lot more things in that realm. My second son is a chef. He's opened restaurants. We would have done a lot more things in that realm.
Neat.
So looking at your kids now and the talents and abilities they have, you can hone in on those things and teach them. It's not just because you're smart and you're talented. It's because God gave you that ability. Let's be the best we can at that. Let's find better ways to do things, so that it brings God glory and we're taking dominion, but we're also helping people. And also it's just fun to learn that way too.
And so I think this jumps over to your other big point, because when I asked what are the two key things, you said having that biblical foundation, and the other is knowing your kids.
Yeah.
And just that privilege of being with our kids and being able to see them shine, to see them bloom, to see them get passionate about something that you thought, I never would have thought that you would have got excited about that.
It's usually that way, isn't it? It's something you wouldn't, totally unexpected. Sometimes you plan a big thing and it's not what you thought. And then it's one of those days where you're not really planning it. And all of a sudden they want to go beyond. And you're like, really? This was interesting to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Right?
Yeah.
That's the freedom of homeschooling.
Yeah. And it jumps off of, academics are all good and measurable, but things like worldview and relationship are not the things where we can say, today we got there, we aced it, it's done, we're going to move on to the next level, right? Like it is a continual process. It's that marathon, and it's that long-term investment in knowing our kids. So what thoughts do you have about knowing your kids, knowing their strengths? Tell me how we can do that well as homeschooling parents.
Yeah, I think praying for your kids is key. And, I think the more kids you have and the more hectic your life is, it's harder to give that attention. So, if you can have some individual time with your kids once in a while and just have real good heart-to-heart conversations. My best conversations with my granddaughter are in the car alone. And we don't have too many of those like we used to, because now I'm homeschooling her brother. When it's your family, you're piling all into the car to go somewhere and there's a lot of activity going on. It's easy not to have that one-on-one time. And so, there are times where she and I will talk about something and I'll tell my son, I'm like, hey, I just want you to know she and I had this conversation today. You might want to follow through with it on your own at home. But, if I were at home and they were my kids, I would pray for those opportunities to have the conversations. And really, it requires slowing down and prioritizing. And it's really hard because you're making meals. Many people are working. I'm working. You've got littles that need your attention. You're part of a church. I've got parents that I care for as well. And so knowing what your role is and when, sometimes God is really good about surprising you with those things that comes out of nowhere. But also listening and paying attention. And I think a lot of times we assume things about our kids, and then when you just sit there beside them for a while and all of a sudden out of nowhere, they start talking about something that's totally unrelated to what they're doing. Those are those moments where you go, okay, let's just close up the book. There have been a couple of times where we have the homeschool hub. That's what BJU Press uses. It has all of the calendar and all the things in. And there are days where I've just gone and clicked complete.
Yeah.
Sat there with her eyes wide open, like, what is happening here? And I'm like, hey, listen, I want to talk more about whatever it was. Maybe we're talking about designing a robot or something we talked about, or something she read about that was today. We were talking about fallout. She was talking about fallout shelters and something about World War II and about dropping atomic bombs. And I was changing out the laundry from the washer to the dryer. She came to me and started to ask me about that. Well, that was a conversation that I needed to stop what I was doing. I couldn't just flippantly go, oh, yeah, by the way, we bombed some people. And I mean, it was a significant situation. And she started connecting that to other parts of history. And she said, well, America also has a history of doing this and this and this. Why did we do that? And what what happened to those people. And I thought, okay, we're going to have to stop and talk about this a little bit. And I wanted her to get a good understanding of it. And she was able to develop some thoughts about it, but I wanted her to feel secure that we're not being irrational and doing terrible things to people, but we've also made good decisions and bad decisions. And who we vote for is important, and how we treat people is important. And as we learn about these things in our books, what do we do with that information?
Right.
Are we compassionate? Are we going to help somebody? Are we? So, it's some of those conversations just happen out of nowhere. And I think that take up those chances when you can. And then I would say, try to have a coffee date or some kind of a one-on-one time with your kids once in a while. And they may never talk about anything like that. It may just be them being a kid.
Just listen.
They need the security of knowing that you care about them personally. It has nothing to do with academics at all. It's just, I'm your child and you're my mom and you love me.
Yeah. So, I think that when we started to homeschool, one of the things that meant the most to me was the aha moments. Just to think that my child would sit in a classroom with a teacher who'd done this 10, 15, 20 times before with classes of 20, 30, 35 students, and that their goal was to get that checked off.
Yep.
Whereas my goal was to watch and to see that happen and see that child go, oh, I get it.
Yep.
And what a thing to pass over. What a miraculous thing when the Lord makes these children with these little brains that are so capable of doing complex, amazing things, and to kind of to sell it off to somebody who is just trying to make sure, because she's busy. Teachers are phenomenal in classrooms. They do so much work for our kids. But when I can slow down and go, that was a moment when we went, I get it. Yeah. And not to miss that little tiny miracle. But then that does move into those bigger things where we're going, where we're going to have those conversations about tough things. I don't understand. How do we deal with the incredible, scary, overwhelming things that come from looking at history and wars and all kinds of things like that? We've got to be able to talk through them. I've often said to my kids when we open up a workbook, maybe when they have a bad attitude, there's 2 lessons here. There's 2 lessons here. You need to do your math today, and you need to do it with the right attitude. Yeah. Or in that case, there's 2 lessons here. You've got to learn these facts and what's going on, but let's deal with the scary parts, the concerning parts, the parts that we have to assimilate. Where does this fit into my biblical worldview? So we've got to have that written lesson with all of the parts and the things to check off. We got to do that stuff, but we also need to do these other pieces where we stop and we look at what's important here.
Right, because that's the big goal of it anyway, right? I mean, so try to choose materials that support that, that make it easier for you.
Yes.
And it can be any number of things. It just gets complicated sometimes. So if you can make it simple, that's easier for you. But your relationship is an ongoing conversation. The academics is just another angle at that conversation. And I think those aha moments are extremely important. And even then, if you don't take the time to celebrate them, you miss out as the parent, which is the whole reason you're doing this, right? To develop that. But then let your child celebrate that too. And so, little things like that with my grandkids, when they do things like they get rewarded for things that they do. And I'm like, hey, that was a whatever reward. And I'm like, mark it on the thing. And when we get so many of those, it's a whatever. Or I'm like, hey, you know what? It's a hot chocolate moment, or it's a popcorn party for you. Yeah. We stop what we're doing and we celebrate that somebody came up with some really great idea, which was part of the critical thinking and biblical worldview idea to begin with. It was being that creative thinker and thinking outside the box. And again, they're not going to remember that exact lesson in history, but they're going to remember that they had a good thought and they were thinking critically, and it will help them develop some more thinking, and that you celebrated that and made a good environment for them to have that.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we have those facts and ideas in our head, it's helpful. But when it means something to us, the facts stick better.
Yeah.
And it's much more meaningful.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm. So when the rubber meets the road, what are some key tips or ideas to help a parent tackle this teaching of a worldview, this building of relationship? You've talked about prayer. You've talked about having those one-on-one times, about slowing down, being able to just check the boxes and say, you know what, we're done with that for today.
Yeah,
What
I
are the
think,
things you would advise?
it's easy to plug and play. And the more kids you have, I think it's a juggling act. You're not going to do everything perfectly. You can't. And at the end of the day, it's the big goal. And I think for those who are married, visiting that conversation regularly with your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I have in my head, because I'm a type A and I'm a firstborn and I was a teacher, lesson plan.
There's a disproportionate
Yeah,
number of type A firstborn homeschooling
yeah,
moms.
it's a bad combo, right? And my husband also works from home when he is not out of town too, and so he'll come down periodically. My office is downstairs, his office is upstairs, and he'll come down periodically and talk to the kids, and he'll talk about something, and I'm thinking, oh, we've got to keep moving, we got stuff we got to do. And he'll take them from where they are there, and he'll take them to a whole other direction, and I have to stop and go, I am so thankful that he took the time to do that. He made it real. He was loving on them for who they are, for young children that are in our home.
Mm-hmm.
And the academics was just part of what we were doing in the home that
Mm-hmm.
moment, but it wasn't just about the academics.
No.
And for me, that's a hard part, especially when, in South Carolina, we have 180 days of school. And I am very, very careful to make sure we have all 180 days are done. And I'm always checking the lesson plan to make sure we've crossed off this and that.
Right.
So, on the days where you're doing really well and the kids can fly
Mm-hmm.
academically, and then the days where you need to slow down and back off a little bit and give your kids some space and enjoy doing the field trips, doing the hands-on things. Those are the most meaningful and the most useful things, because they're learning by doing. And if they make mistakes, they learn how to fix them. That's part of critical thinking, is to make mistakes and to build things and to design things. My granddaughter's really good with writing. She loves to write, but she doesn't love to proofread and edit. But she loves technology. And so I use a lot of technology for work. And so I teach her how to use those tools under my leadership, so she's not just all over the internet. And I'm like, okay, you might as well learn how to proofread and edit properly. So let's go learn how to do it. So she's getting those skills, but she's still going her own route. And I would say keep some open hands sometimes too, because in your mind, you're thinking we absolutely have to do these things or third grade will not be complete.
Right.
There are some things you have to do for third grade to be complete, but it's not just everything in the objectives of the 180 lessons. It's really thinking through planning, talk to your spouse. Hey, listen, these are the things I think are most important. How can we work this out? I talk to her parents a lot, and I'm like, this is something that's really important. I feel like she really needs this. And they're like, okay, then we're going to make a plan to do that. So we're going to allow so much time for this instead of that.
Mm-hmm.
And we make goals, a lot of short-term goals. We make a lot of weekly goals and monthly goals. And I tell her in advance, because she's sixth grade, she's old enough to understand. By the end of the year, we're going to be able to do these things. So let's keep that in mind. I don't mind if you do this and this and you learn calligraphy, whatever it is you're doing. But remember that our end goal is this. So let's give you those skills, those real life skills, those study skills, to help you so that you can accomplish those goals. So I think being a little bit loose with very specifics for the bigger goals are helpful.
We have, and I know that it varies from state to state, and it does here from province to province as well, how much reporting or formality we have to have with regards to our records and our teaching. But one thing we always encourage families to do is while we keep those records, it's not so much about whether you finished third grade in third grade as that this child was challenged to move at a pace that was appropriate for them. So what we want to do is compare where we are now to where we can be and where we have been and say, was that an appropriate pace? And did we put in the right amount of time with some well-chosen materials, with the right attitudes and the right atmosphere to get that done? And if not, then let's make some adjustments. But the goal is not to finish third grade spelling in third grade as much as to finish that third grade spelling in the appropriate time span. Because some kids should do that in first grade. And some should finish it in sixth or seventh grade because they've continued to move at an appropriate pace through those things.
Right. And you know how your child learns, and you know what they do best. So, you know, it may take 3 or 4 days to be able to learn a certain concept. For us, it's math. With her, math is hard. And so right now she's doing geometry. She's so happy because it's so much easier. When we get to multiplying and dividing fractions and decimals, she gets really intense. And so do I. And I'm like, I know.
And it's hard for every kid.
I know. And I'm thinking, oh, sixth grade math. And I thought, you know what? Right now, I'm not looking at the whole game. I mean, I am. I can see the scope. I'm thinking through right now, Christmas. Yes. My goal for her by Christmas is to be able to do these certain things and feel successful doing them. And if we make it, great. And if we don't, January will come and we'll pick back up. But I do see the progress. And I think keeping notes, keeping track of things and giving them encouragement and going, hey, listen, you couldn't even do this 3 weeks ago. Look what you're doing now. I can see the progress. So I think even for the parent, we need that too, because we're measuring ourselves too, as much as we're measuring our kids. And I think sometimes we put a lot of stress on ourselves. If I don't have all these things that I think I need to do, then I'm not a successful homeschool parent. Well, that's not biblically true. That's not what God asks of us.
No, that's neat. So, I mean, as a homeschooling parent, you are obviously very familiar with BJU resources. And can you tell me what BJU has to offer to these homeschooling families that are wanting to do their best to make sure that their children are exposed to the right materials with that ability to flex it however we need to? What can I do with BJU materials to meet the needs of my kids? What's available?
Oh boy, so much. So BJU Press has materials for children as young as 2 and 3. If you really want to go there, you know, I think preschool is good for some kids. I think kindergarten is fine for others, but some people want the exposure. 2 and 3-year-olds,
and a lot of our Christian schools have preschool programs. Yeah.
Right. Well, and a lot of parents too are homeschooling other children and they need something for the younger ones. And so they are very age appropriate and they're fun, but they're not intense. It's just sort of exposure and fun. And so those are available to you from K4 all the way through 12th grade. We have textbook kits and the textbooks come with the teacher's edition. Everything you need to know is in the teacher's edition, all the instructions, the objectives, there's chapter openers and resources and notes to the parent, and there's additional information. It tells you all the things you need to know. It actually has differentiated instruction. So if you've got children with special needs, maybe you have a gifted child who can go above and beyond academically, or maybe you need to do some extra work for ELA for your kids. There's actually little notes in there. The biblical worldview is very clear in there. There are icons for the critical thinking. So all the directions are there for the parent. And then, of course, you have student books and workbooks. And if you want tests and quizzes, but we also offer video courses. And I am a big proponent of those video courses. I love them. I taught using the teacher's editions. I love the teacher's edition. I think a paper teacher's edition is a beautiful thing. I help write them. I love them. I have a whole bunch of them in my office. But I'll tell you, the teachers that BJU Press Homeschool has, they have taken these lessons and they've written them specific to schoolers. And so they have studios there, and they will teach the lessons and make them very homeschool specific. So they're teaching to your child. They have fun little backgrounds behind them. They have little animated clips. They have all kinds of little funny and interesting factoids and things. And I'll tell you, those are a lifesaver. What I love best about those is that the teachers are saying the very same things I would say myself. And I have a friend who's got a podcast, and she uses BJU Press exclusively. And she'll say it doesn't compete with our beliefs. It aligns perfectly with our beliefs as a family. And boy, if you can get that in every subject, that biblical worldview, that understanding of your child, and knowing what a homeschooler needs, specifically with a biblical worldview and critical thinking in mind, with a joy of learning. If they can provide that for you with a video course or with a textbook kit, it's good stuff. And so for the parent, you can do it either way. But the video course is actually, the teacher's edition is online for you in a PDF, so you could use that. There are e-textbooks. So there are times where my granddaughter is working from home, and I'm like, go do your e-textbook. She'll listen. A lot of times I'm like, listen to the e-textbook, take some notes, because I'm trying to teach her some skills. And they can do things with that as well. And then the hub, which is the big thing, BJU Press Homeschool Hub. And by the way, that's free to anybody, but it really works well if you use BJU Press materials when you purchase your items, or even buy books. If they would come to Learning House and buy books right there, they can enroll in the hub, and like I say, it's the Math Success behind you there. They could go on to BJU Press Homeschool, and they can put on their account and assign Math 6 to their child, and it'll pull up any resources that are available to them, and it'll show the lessons, and it'll all populate into a calendar. And then you can keep track as a parent of what assignments are due, and you can delete assignments, you can edit assignments, you can keep grades. And that's what's nice about it too, because I'm always moving things around in there. It's like, oh, it's your birthday, we're taking the day off. Oh, we're taking Christmas vacation, we're done. So it's very customizable, and with more than one child, it's especially helpful. The other part that's great about that too is if your child is learning to be independent, they can handle a lot of that themselves. So for my granddaughter who's in 6th grade, she uses the hub. She knows how to do it. She knows what to click on, what to do. And then she'll come to me and say, Grandma, can you check this? Or do I need to take this quiz? Or can I go back and rewatch this? So they're learning some independent skills as well. But then I get to pick and choose what she gets to do. So I love it. It's wonderful. Great for the parent, great for the kid.
And I didn't realize that it's just free to anybody. That's great. So using a full BJU grade kit or using just one subject, and that's something that we want more families to know too, that if you just want, I mean, we have families that come in and say, that's a good textbook. I just want to take that textbook home, and they don't want all the assignments and the tests and all that stuff. Go for it. But having the textbook kits, you can have, you can just get your grade 6 math, or you can get all of your grade 6, or you could say, all my kids are going to do their BJU math, and we're going to use other resources for.
Yes, and we have that. There are families that maybe just use our math or science, and you can put your other things in. Now you have to do it manually, but the gift in that is you have a record keeper, and you have a calendar, which is helpful. The online courses, your tests and quizzes are online for 5th grade and up. Your e-textbooks are there. Your all your resources, your video links, all those things are there. If you were to buy a textbook kit and go on, there will be resources there, but not the same resources, because like the teacher's edition wouldn't be available to you online because that's purchasable. But there are many resources there, so it's definitely worth doing. Check it out. It's worth looking into.
Yeah, and while we have many families that use a full BJU grade kit, and they'll say we need the grade 6 or the grade 8 or whatever, a lot of our families will say we want to use some Canadian resources for social studies, and so they will take the other pieces of the grade kit, use their homeschool hub. Phenomenal resources and a really well developed. We really appreciate our grassroots authors and publishers here in Canada that are just making one small curriculum or one series of books. But BJU, on the other hand, is a very well a very well-oiled machine in terms of giving us resources that you just can't make up as a mom. The apps, the really well-developed teacher's guides, and these aren't teacher guides like you would have. I just talked to a mom today who said, could I use this resource that I looked up online? And it was a math course. And we talked about how math courses that are developed for a public school system often have a teacher's guide that's $600 or $800, not reasonable for a homeschooling parent, but that is also not made for a parent to use. And BJU TEs, teacher editions, like many homeschooling resources, are meant for a parent, not for a professional educator who's got all kinds of teacherese in their background. And you don't have to have an education to open that textbook.
No, you do not.
That teacher's guide, which is so
no, you do not. And I would recommend, well, BJU Press has a wonderful YouTube channel, and so do we. Homeworks by Precept does. Okay. We do a lot of look inside the book videos on our YouTube channel on the homeworks, and you can actually page through a book with a consultant and see what's available there. But BJU Press actually has sample video lessons. So if you were interested in like 5th grade math, go to the YouTube channel, look for 5th grade math, and you can watch a whole sample lesson. You can actually look and see what's available to you. But I will tell you, even looking through the teacher's edition and just looking through the table of contents and looking through the front matter, when I got a new book every year when I was a teacher, classroom teacher, the first thing I did was sit down with the teacher's edition. And I took copious notes on all of this, like what's new, where do I find the parts and pieces, what's the most important thing. And when I was an author at BJU Press, I often said to families, this is sort of the brain of the book, that front matter, those first 15, 20 pages, that's the heart of what the authors want to get to you. So you understand what the course is about and then what makes it tick. So you don't want to just do the lessons. You want to understand it. It's like reading your Bible. If you don't understand what the Bible's about, it's hard to understand, right? But if you know that there's an overarching story about God, that when you're reading through Leviticus, it's a little easier to deal with, right?
Understand these lists and rules, yes.
Right. And it's obviously the Bible is not a teacher's edition, but the idea there is you do get a really good picture, a good snapshot of what the course is and the tools available to you. And it's a lot of good parent helps so that you can go, okay, I see what's happening here. So as I get to lesson 53 and I'm doing something, I can make a really good informed decision and go, okay, well, that looks like a good idea, but I don't think that's the most important thing. What I think really is most important right now is to spend time on this. And so we're going to go to the library and we're going to get additional books to go with to talk about Asia. And we're going to have some foods from the land of Asia. And, you can do all the things, you have some additional things, but there are suggested resources for you too. And if you go on the hub, they'll have suggested resources available to you. We also have Journey Forth. Do you carry Journey Forth in your store?
We do. We have all of the Journey Forth titles because you know what? We know that they're the kinds of titles that we can recommend to Christian homeschooling families because we're only going to carry things here in the store that we believe would be appropriate for a Christian homeschooling family.
Love that.
Always say a caveat is what I think is appropriate. You may not think is appropriate. Right. And we all have to use our own appropriate filters for our families, but know that we carry all the Journey Forth books because we know that they've been tried and tested to be appropriate for Christian families, not denominational, not attached to a particular denomination,
right?
But that they are Christian content that is appropriate. So,
right.
Very good.
Those are good resources too, and we'll refer to those oftentimes too. So those are our resources.
For sure. You mentioned the look through the book and videos, sample lessons, and so on. We try to have as much of that as possible on the Learning House website. So if families are looking through learninghouse.ca, BJU updated recently, and so we've had to do a lot of updates as well. So not all of that is available right now, but we're working on it. And there's A lot of behind the scenes stuff, you know, kind of like a duck. It looks calm on the surface, but we're working hard behind the scenes to make a lot of those things available again because of those updates. But we've always made sure that we had as many samples and videos and stuff available for our families, so that if they're wandering through our site.
That's a wonderful resource for families. That's great.
Yeah, we're just passionate about making sure that you can come to the Learning House and know that there's trusted materials and that you can get as much information as possible to make an informed decision.
That's wonderful. What a great resource for families. I love that.
Yeah. Well, we are passionate about that. I've kept you a long time here, Sharon. Thanks for spending the time with me and spending your voice with me when you have a cough. But we really appreciate the relationship that we've had for many years with BJU, the way that we've been able to support Christian schools and homeschools in getting these resources that we know are solid. They're solid biblical content. They have solid academic content. They are family friendly. They work well for a mom who just needs to open a teacher guide and see what needs to be done next, for families who want that traditional textbook workbook style of learning. Do you have any final tips before I let you go to parents to help them help their children to thrive in their home education?
I think just pray for your kids, pray for wisdom, notice their abilities and their talents, and then try to have a loose plan for the year. Enjoy the hands-on as much as you can. Anywhere you can combine things with your kids, do it. Take lots of pictures, and you know, on the hard days, pray and ask for help, and then on the good days, remember to thank God and do that in front of your kids. And say, let's thank God for helping us with whatever, and help them to see that He's the center of their education. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with making that real, and having support is really helpful. So, you know, having a spouse, having a parent, having someone at the Learning House, having a consultant, somebody that can help you not feel overwhelmed, I think is important. And just enjoy the journey. It goes so quickly, and it's worth every bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're here. We do free consultations. We're talking every day, one-on-one, whether it's our customer service team working through the nuts and bolts or helping people to choose resources, or whether it's a more detailed consultation that I do. And we always, always, always recommend families get involved in their homeschool community locally, whether it's your provincial organization, whether it's a local group, whether it's a co-op, but just get yourself around other people who are doing this crazy thing, because we all do need that support. So
that's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time, Sharon. I really appreciate you sharing with us today and sharing about BJU resources. This has just been a real blessing.
Well, thank you for asking, and let us know where we can help you.
For sure.